but it's definitely a different landscape football now than it was. It definitely is, and that's because one of the biggest reasons is the physical nature of the players. If you know a technical level at under 12 wouldn't be good enough at under 21. You have to mould and move that and shape players and then help themselves to become that elite level. You win tomorrow in development. You don't win tomorrow in first team. You have to win in the present. If it was easy, a lot more people would be doing it.
Hello coaches, and welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach podcast interview. Big one today. We are joined by Edy Vivies, assistant coach at Middlesbrough first team. I sat down with him before he took the role at Middlesbrough. He also worked as first team assistant manager at Coventry City, and before that spent 6 years at Chelsea. Worked in their academy, worked with the under 18s, worked with the under 21s, worked with the development squad. And that is the majority of today's conversation. What does elite level development really look like? Edy gives phenomenal insight into the number of variables and how to manage those variables. I think you're going to love it. If you do, please make sure you like, please make sure you subscribe. And an extra special thanks to our partners at SportsLab 360 for teaming up with us on this interview. Since 2016, they've been helping thousands of coaches empower their players to improve soccer IQ and decision making on the pitch. It's one of the most easiest and affordable ways to get more out of your players, and I would encourage you to stick around at the halfway point with a special offer. Coaches, as always, appreciate you listening. Here is Edy. Enjoy. Edy, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Yeah, the first question, something that I'm really keen to find out a little bit more about as I'm here in the player development side. There's obviously a lot of talk at the minute about the style of football in England and this, again, the word that Gary Neville's thrown around, this robotic nature. Do you agree with that, first and foremost, that it's moving in that direction? And how have you seen the landscape in the last 5-10 years?
I can understand a little bit what Gary, obviously he's been an elite player and he's been at the top elite of the game, winning Champions Leagues, winning championships, so he knows what that looked like in his day. I think certainly over the last 10 years, the physicality of players has changed. So you have got some real specimens now. So maybe the technical element and the mavericks is in certain players, but not as many as you used to see. And I think if you've got the physical stats and numbers that these players are banging out every Premier League game, certainly if you talk about the Premier League, then I think that makes it a little bit running, if you like. And I think that's quite a big change, certainly, from what I see in the last 10 years. You've still got the exceptional players, you've still got people that can excite and get you off, but a lot of the teams are extremely well coached, certainly have their own methods. And I think the emergence this year of, say, the Forest and the Bournemouth and the Fulhams, obviously very exceptional coaches, all three, but in different ways. I think mainly maybe because the gap is a little bit closer. You're probably at the back end of, the development cycle of terms of when in the academies were really seeing fruition. And I think that has played a part as well, I would say. But robotic, I watch a lot of I've been watching a lot of football, although I see all the levels. I certainly don't see that in League Two, League One, the Championship. I see very well coached teams in the Championship as well, but I don't see a robotic nature. But I do understand the Premier League, where all the riches are and the financial implications of having an unsuccessful season. And also the fact that, I think massive clubs in Man United and Spurs are where they are in the Premier League. I think that maybe plays a part as well in people thinking that are closely involved in those clubs. But it's definitely a different landscape football now than it was. It definitely is, and that's because one of the biggest reasons is the physical nature of the players.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Do you think that there's almost a disappointment from, or are the expectations too high from a standard of the product, where people, again, looking at the technical quality that's on show, looking at the physicality and the ability of these players to break out in transition, that we're almost spoiled for choice as a observer of the game, that we want to see more of that there more often, where again, if you open that up, there's an element of risk there as well at that level, right?
Yeah, I think the top 4 or 5 teams, or what's deemed as it, with the tables being slightly different this year, but those top 4 or 5 teams, if you're somebody in the bottom half of the Premier League and you want to make it an open game, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to lose. If you're brave, or you have bravery, as the Bournemouth head coach Iraola has shown this year, if you're brave in that way of pressing high and with real intensity with a young, dynamic team, then at times you can cause real problems and certainly have some outstanding results. Or you can do a Nuno at Forest where you sit in a low block and have extreme pace. And I think, this speed added to physicality of these teams now, the speed in transition, as you mentioned. Transition has always been an important part of the game, but it seems even more so now. There's definitely less risks with the implications of staying in the Premier League. The riches, there's definitely less risks of the teams towards that bottom end. Unfortunately, the last couple of years have meant for the first time ever that the 3 promoted teams have come straight back down. It shows you the gulf is getting bigger, sadly. It's enormous between the Championship and the Premier League. Do you throw money at it when you get there? If you then get there, are you going to play open when you're going away to a top 4 side? These are the questions you have to ask. I think it comes down to how the club's managed, what the expectations are of the club. If you go into the Premier League and that money, that revenue, that you can use it to safeguard your club if you come straight back down. And it's been talked about yo-yo teams over the last decade, but is it massively disappointing to be a yo-yo team? I would put a question mark on that, because you've got some teams in the Championship who have been Premier League teams who have been nowhere near getting back into the Premier League. Would they like to be a yo-yo team, like a Norwich? You see Norwich now at the moment, having been a yo-yo team. Certainly the seasons they've had in transition of coaches and bringing in a younger model, you could argue last year they were in the playoffs, so they were 2 games away from the Premier League. So it's what you deem as, what is this cycle? What's driving the cycle? There's going to be different views and different viewpoints, but I certainly think that there's a lot less risk in the games I watch. But I think, you're right in the point that us as people who like watching the game, love the game, or the normal fans who pay for their hard-earned money to go, they want to see the 70-yard long busting runs and cross and finish in every 5-minute block. It's probably happening in every 20, 25 minutes now, and that is to do with physicality of players, the coaching, the environments, and maybe the pressures from above. There's a lot of American owners now. You don't know how that's being managed. Certainly the Ipswich was interesting listening to their sporting director talking this year at the leaders conference about how they don't ring after the game. There's not that sense of the English where in previous years the manager's getting calls 5 minutes after what happened today. And I think that's definitely gone on in the Premier League with some of the highly important big owners of big clubs. So whether there's a little bit more understanding behind the scenes, but that pressure, you can only put that on the shoulders of the 20 coaches in that level, the 24 in the Championship, and so further down. That intensive pressure, maybe that is leading to a more cautious approach. But I certainly think across the board there's a better level of coaching ability, and I think that would have linked into the work that was done in the academies, in the emergence of the Triple P, because you've come out of that back end of that 10-year cycle. Some outstanding coaches worked in that youth development program at that time in the big clubs that actually moulded into now. They're 26-year-olds. They were 17, 18, these young players, and now they're leading forces in the Premier League and leagues around Europe and the world. So I think that's definitely a part as well.
Well, let's get stuck in there about the youth development side, because obviously your experiences at Chelsea, I really want to go into what it takes to get to that level. I think sometimes, again, as a casual observer of the game, people undersell how tough it is to break through. All the roles that you had at Chelsea, a number of age groups, a number of different roles. What was in a club that seems outside looking in that there's always a fair bit of change about Chelsea every year too, what was something from the academy standpoint that was almost consistent from right the way through?
Well, the academy had obviously, it had a very clear plan in the way the teams would play, not so much system, but the way, the identity you were going to play out from the back. You obviously have players that were comfortable on the ball in all positions. It's Chelsea, like many other teams in that level. You had how players had to develop individually. I don't think, through the age groups, obviously I started at under 12s and worked the way through to the 21s, then called the 23s, development squad. It's had a lot of names, but in that, the technical level of improving was the same. That's a constant through the age group. So if a technical level at under 12 wouldn't be good enough at under 21, you have to mould and move that and shape players and then help themselves to become that elite level. It's also when I was there, I was fortunate and maybe not so fortunate that Chelsea were the leading club in world football. Really, they were winning Premier Leagues, Champions Leagues. They had 5 of the greatest players to play in the Premier League in their starting 11, all at the same time. So to break through for young players was extremely difficult. That's not an excuse, it's just a fact. So if they got through, I think it almost meant even more. And that core of how you develop technically, how you develop the player to be a person, I think that's the big thing, because to be a success in football, in any football, you've got to have real resilience. You've got to have a work ethic. You can be a maverick, but how do you learn? So I think, do you learn from visual, or do you learn from repeated drills? Do you learn from sitting with your coaching staff and observing your clips and trying to learn little pieces? Do you learn by just talking? Is it 2 minutes coming off from a training ground? Because academies, it's very different, obviously, in under 12s to it is when you move up, because the only thing is you start in 11v11. So to understand the pitch size at under 12, from coming from when you're 11, where you play 6 months on the small pitch still, and then 6 months on a big pitch, 11v11. So there's all those bits that you have to get in. Somebody who could look amazing under 10, under 11 on a small-sided area suddenly comes onto a full pitch. It doesn't look like you've got the physicality. Then you've got the growth spurt you've got to go through, and this drifts into 13s, 14s. When do they start understanding tactical? Because when they go with the first team, they've got to be strong tactically. Otherwise, the first team manager and coaching staff will pull them up on that, will pull you up on that. So there's a lot of different components, but I think the technical importance, I think, sometimes gets lost. And I think that's the same for me all the way through the age groups. Even when you get into the first team, it should still be honed in on. You still should be focused. Obviously, a lot of that would go into individual work, IAPs, action plans, whatever you call it, to develop the individual. So they're the key ingredients for me. The rest of it is very different considering which individual player you work with. And this is where you go to the skill of coaches, support staff, and why I should imagine the academies try and employ elite people in each role, because you need to be elite to be able to, dealing with world-class talent. And you're dealing with players that they want to be in that first team tomorrow. That's where the game's also changed. There's not a lot of waiting, and staff are also really, at that academy, top-end academy, the staff want to get to the end goal. The staff want to be across the road, as we used to say in the first team. Is that sometimes to the detriment of the players developing? I would ask a question. And I certainly think that changed. That's certainly nothing to do with me sitting here as a 55-year-old man. I went into it at 38. I don't think I just come out of playing. I don't think that's how I saw it at that time. That definitely changed over time, that staff wanted it quick. And I certainly felt very fortunate, and still do to this day, that I worked in the Chelsea Academy when there were specific elite, in my opinion, world-class coaches at 10s, 12s, 14s who were very comfortable being that elite coach at that level. Doesn't mean they couldn't work higher. They just had a real skill niche set, to understand. If you're a 60-year-old man, Cyril Davis, who I worked with under 12s at that time, who can have the empathy with an 11-year-old under 12s, I found that incredible. And that is a skill, and not everybody's made that way. Not everybody's, certain people, probably me included in that, are more geared to working with the top end, the under 18s, the under 21s, or first team. And others are very, very talented at understanding players, what they need, how they tick. And it was fascinating to be there. And when I think about it now, I always look back on it fondly and think about those steps that people help shape players. I think that's because you're not just making a footballer, you're trying to make them into these people and young men that they've become.
Hello coaches, we'll take a quick break here. Does this sound familiar? You finish up a session, and as you're walking off the pitch, you're thinking to yourself that you didn't accomplish anywhere near what you wanted to get out of the training session. You stuck to the plan, you got all your coaching points in, but mentally it didn't seem to click for the players. If that sounds familiar, I would highly recommend you check out the work of our partners, Sports Lab 360. The platform is made up of interactive, highly engaging modules which you can assign to your players to help them improve their soccer IQ and decision making on the pitch. In addition to the growth you'll see, you can also use the platform as a way to address tactical areas of development. Let's just say you're working on a session on counter pressing. You assign the Sports Lab 360 module on that topic for the players to review beforehand, and by reviewing the quiz results, you get an immediate idea of what the players grasp and what they don't. So instead of walking into the training session guessing on what the players know, you know exactly what they know, and you can build your session around that. And if you need any more inspiration, Sports Lab 360 actually teamed up with Modern Soccer Coach to provide you with a number of different session plans, complete with coaching points and ready for you to put them into action. They've got a special offer for all podcast listeners, MSC20. I'll put the link below, MSC20 for, you've guessed it, 20% off. SportsLab360.com. Highly recommend you check them out, and a massive thanks to them for all their support throughout the years. Back to Edy, enjoy. I really want to chat about maybe it's the coaching community, or maybe it's just society in general, about, I don't think there's an appreciation of, again, how difficult it is and how many variables that need to kind of click for it to happen, for that player to break through. But I think as coaching, where we're now getting into this, well, here's your periodization, here's your analysis, here's your ADP. Like, that ADP is going to change drastically, like you said, where a player is maybe a maverick at under 10. How do you work as a leader in that without getting the player into this set of a profile that is a basic, like you almost limit the player? How do you avoid that?
I think we're in development. I think changing the player's position is a key thing for me. Well, it was. I used to play central midfielders at centre back quite a lot, so they could understand and see the game from behind. So they're seeing all the game, but also because they're so comfortable on the ball, because they're midfield players, you can see the rotations and movements going on that they need to be good at when they go in there with less space. So you're almost letting them develop in a slightly different way. There's so many different variables around how you can manage or lead. You've certainly got to be on top of all your support staff in terms of, okay, how often do we revisit this player? Well, 6 weeks. 6 weeks maximum for me. You start to drift in little bits. If there's something they're really strong at, i.e. left foot, and they're a right-footed player, you don't go away from that. You keep honing on the left foot, hone on what they're really good at, but you start to drip feed the things that they may not want to do, because at 10, they want to pick the ball up and dribble past everybody, and they may have the capability to do that. when they drift into under 14, that'll become much more difficult because they may still be 5'10" and now they're playing against 6'2" players at 15. So you sort of go, okay, so we now need to get them to see the game slightly differently, i.e. when do they release the pass to be able to get the ball back in space that they've been used to at 10 years old. Now they're 15, 16, 17. So working with them, trying to get the buy-in, bringing the players in at an age, certainly when they can understand, maybe not at 10 years of age, but you can ask, you can check. Guided discovery has always been a big thing of mine. You're not telling a player you have to stand in X like you're talking about. I don't know, because I'm not in the academy set up anymore, so I don't know how many coaches are still doing the command, which would stifle talent. There's no doubt about it. But I think if you get players to see the game from a different position, a different emphasis, sit with them, let them watch a game on a screen, let them talk, they critique, get other players to critique themselves. I always think that's the biggest. If you can get to a level where one of your left backs is critiquing the left back who's playing in front of them with an objective eye, sit there, go through the game, give them tips, not try and undermine them, just positive and improvement profiles, and you're there just observing, maybe trying to manage it if you feel it's going into. If you can get to that level with your players, certainly in development, you're in an incredibly strong position, because we all know that they're trying to get into the first team in development. The player is only worried about themselves getting into the team, getting into the first team, being a Premier League player, playing on the international stage. We all know what the rewards are, but you're going to need people to get there. And in top-end academies, you need players to help players on their journey. They may not reach there. In the end, they'll reach their level. I'm convinced about that. The players end up in the level they should be in most cases, not all, because injury can curtail, outside factors, personal loss, etc., can certainly affect people. Parents moving to a different country, change of environment, struggling in exams can affect people, players. There's all these things, they are human. So I think in most cases, that is the way it shapes, but you can certainly get to a level where you've given them everything. And then if you feel that you've given everything to a player, if the player still hasn't made that step, then again, you have to question, and you should go back over and study your notes and see where could you have given them a little bit more in this area, etc. If you can look in the mirror and say, I gave them everything every day, they worked extremely hard every day. I think then sometimes it comes down to what is the state of that first team, and all these environmental factors go into that project. But if you're a developer, because that's what you are if you work in academy, you're a developer, should you be any more proud if someone's playing in the Swedish second division and doing tremendously well, winning that title, to playing in the World Cup for their country? Well, I didn't. I felt as much pride for that person because they're still earning a living in the game, playing professionally, winning things, and I know how hard that is to actually achieve that at any level. So if it was easy, a lot more people would be doing it.
Absolutely. You have a great quote about I read in an interview, the U18s players were more difficult, more challenging to manage than the U21 players.
Easier.
Oh, sorry,
easier.
They were easier.
Yeah.
How are they easier?
Well, it's because of the program. So the program of an 18s, I love being an 18s coach. I can see why people stay there for 20 odd years, but the program is really, you play on a Saturday. So you have the full week, play on the Saturday, you finish, players are off Saturday afternoon, Sunday, you come in on the Monday, you review the game, you go through the individual clips, you deal with that game, and then you build into the next game. It's only the Youth Cup that then starts in a midweek. So it's really easy to plan your lives for the players to have real clarity. And there's not that many outside factors because generally in the 18s at Chelsea, the players are 16, 17 because once they've gone to 17, they've already moved up to the 21s because the level of talent, etc. When you get to the 21s, you've got the outside factors of they've done the youth team, they've played in the Youth Cup, they may then have had 1 year in the UEFA Youth League, which is under 19/3 players at under 20. They want to be playing. They want to be on loan. They want to be, their minds changed. From 17, their focus quickly goes to, where am I going to play in the first team? Am I going to play here? Do I need to go on loan? So to manage that is more difficult. Plus, you could be playing on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday or Monday. So it completely changes their dynamic of being used to playing on a Saturday, and then they've got a bit of time with their family. A lot of the players live away, they travel back home. Can't do that if you play on Monday. So trying to work out these dynamics and understanding them, and then you'd have players go out on loan. The loan didn't go very well. They come back the second half of the season. They can't go on loan again. They're back in your 21s program. They've played in the 21s for 3 years. They don't want to be there. And that's no disrespect to the players because we're talking about elite talent here. They don't want to be there. So it's very challenging from a coaching and staff perspective, academy manager, etc., to manage them. All you can do is bring them back into your environment and give them that constant of they know how they're going to be worked, they know the level of training, they know the demands, but you have to find something else to engage them with. As a coach, I would always try to challenge them in a different way now. Okay, you've been in the first team. We'd obviously gone to watch them if they would have played. Come back, it hasn't gone. Why didn't it go well? Are they being honest? Do you really need to show them? But what are you going to get out of them in the next few months? Because they want to try and achieve something. When the first team manager needs players for training, is he going to bypass them? Sometimes that happens. So you're now taking younger talent. First team manager wants to look at a 16-year-old. You've got a 19, 20-year-old who's going, oh, what do I do now? Does that become disruptive in your training? You can't allow that because of standards. So there's a lot. It's very challenging and great for your development, more so sometimes than the player. But again, just being honest, being truthful, demanding those high standards you always have. I think that's how you help shape, again, a little bit earlier question, but that's how you shape these players so that you're still having that constant. Because when they go on loan, the great thing is they go into a dressing room where it's a completely different environment. Could be sitting next to a 30-year-old and they're 17, but this is what you need. You need that to develop to the next level. If you're not going to get it, the best one would be obviously to be in Chelsea's first team with the club I worked at, to be in that dressing room with world-class elite talent. Sometimes you have to go to League One, where the players are looking, going, well, we don't know who you are. Our mortgages are getting paid on this result on Saturday, Tuesday night. We need to know that if you're going to, no disrespect, Burton Albion on a Tuesday night, are you going to help us get 3 points? That's what we're interested in, because otherwise we're going to struggle to do what we want to do in the month and buy the things we need for our 3 kids. Different, totally different. And I don't think people understand how hard that is. And I think, because obviously if you come from a top academy, you do get this label, oh, they come in, they think they're going to have their kit washed, because obviously all the excuses get taken away at elite academies. Rightly so, in my opinion, up to a point. I think if you don't sort of show them what it's going to be like, and I always used to demand those levels, because I knew, because obviously I played in the Football League, so I know what they're going to go into, and I didn't want them to have any areas where they were blindsided. So when they were in there, and they'd come back off when it was an international break, and they'd sit in the room and go, oh, you were right about that. He ripped my head off, the captain. And yeah, because that's the environment they're in. So they've had, this tough driving standards. You're at elite level. You want to be a top elite level player. Part of your journey could be that, or it could be going abroad where it's very easy, Ozzy, and training's a lot less intense than England. And yes, that's why I say about the technical, because a lot of that is technical based. Certainly if you go to Holland, the Edy Vivies, only 1 game a week really. So a lot of it is still a development league. So when the players used to go there 17, 18, 19 from Chelsea to Vitesse at the time with the collaboration they had, it was great for them because it was sort of a continuation of their development years. So it's really interesting. You think about it a lot when you come out. When I left, I thought about it a lot, about the development of certain individuals, different people. And I think now it's even more important, actually. I think it's even more important to be how that's working, because there's so much change. Certainly at Chelsea there's been so much change. Academies now, there's a lot more, I think, turnover in staff. And I wonder, certainly where if you've got that constant theme at the top, you can get more constant messages drifting down. I would imagine that must be a big challenge if you haven't. But yeah, it's interesting to talk to people. Obviously, I still know we're in top end development, and it certainly seems like there's still the big challenges that were there before.
The number of variables, and you explaining the type of situations that the players are under. I think the piece on the players, again, no excuse environment, like you said, they come in, contracts are decent as well at that stage. What type of, because you did say that in one of your other interviews about developing really strong footballers, strong characters. How do you navigate around that area, character development?
I think there's different ways. I think show it. I mean, obviously, if you're 6'3", you've got a gruff West Country voice, and you're working in Cobham in Surrey, with a lot of London inner city boys, tough upbringings, or you've got a middle class players from say Middlesex or leafy areas. Got such a big contrast. I think the skill is trying to understand the individual, so getting to know what makes them tick, being very honest around personal things. I always used to, I've been through quite a lot in my life in terms of loss and dealing with difficult situations as I was getting older. I shared some things with them when they were having really tough periods, almost like a shock value, if you like. And I think I just wanted to show them that it's okay also to be vulnerable. So I think that's part of, for me, that's a big part of development. Developing a character is that you show them that they can have different parts to their character. They can certainly have a stern exterior. They can be a real warrior on the pitch. But there's nothing wrong with showing emotion. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm having a difficult day. There's nothing wrong with not having a wonderful training session as long as we can work out together why that was. So being honest. Again, the skill of the staff and anybody working in development football is to see when somebody's having a tough time. Now it's called mental health, of course, and there's a big area around it. It wasn't when we were growing up and playing. It was tough love. That's how it was. But you sort of you can help a player definitely with that. You can help a player understand their character can come to the fore. If they're an inner city boy and they're got 3 siblings and their mum, the dad is not around, and their mum has gone to work in the evening, and they are looking after these kids and they're 12 years old. It's mind-boggling to think about it, but it went on regularly and it still will go on. The reality is they grew up very quickly. So when you're talking to them, they're already the main man in their home. You have to be very careful how you approach that. But if you show them weakness, they jump all over weakness. So their character, not through any fault of their own, has been honed, has been born. And they have this real drive, incredible drive and physical power that could turn into a little bit more than that. They'd go through that window to get to the ball. That type of thing. They want to win because they want to provide for their mum and their 3 brothers and sisters. So that gives them a real... Now you have to manage that and help them hone that, because again, for those people to show vulnerability, nah, I'm the dad, I'm the father figure. It's very difficult. And I think some of the proudest work is when you get that, when you finally see it. It might be a little smile, it might be a giggle, it might be them being okay when they misplaced a pass, rather than totally going inward. Because you have to fight the individual players going inward when mistakes happen. The competitiveness, the nature of that is just trying to understand how they can get the best. And that's how you improve characters, because I work with players in my youth team group who are now teachers. They've come back full circle. 3 of my 18s team are now working in the academy. They're not all coaches, but 2 of them are, and one of them came up through the sports science background because he was always very fit. But when he was told he hadn't quite made it, he knew. That's the bit that gave me a lot of pride, that he knew. He knew that he hadn't quite reached it because he couldn't quite get there, the demands mentally. But he also knew it was okay. Because they're not all going to get there. So that's why I make my point about trying to make better people as well as better players, and I've carried that on through my through all my coaching, senior coaching as well, in how I can help, and it's certainly helped me deal with players at that level from what I learned working at Elite Academy.
Yeah, senior coaching. Let's talk about that with the Coventry and Mark Robbins. I mean, how different is that the dynamics of, like you said, the pros that are paying the mortgage, the different expectations and the demands of players. How difficult is it to balance results of player development?
I think if you've come from a player development background, you've certainly got more of a chance. I think if you haven't, look, managers, head coaches, slightly different with the introduction of the head coach in the last decade, but the managers and the old school, if you like, managers, that's certainly one who I worked with. You're going in and it's very different. You're going in like League Two. So I've gone from trying to prepare players to play Champions League, games against, I use this analogy quite a lot, but a game against Spurs looking like a Champions League game, a chess match on Stamford Bridge, under 21s, to League Two, blood and thunder, goalkeeper not really playing out. You couldn't get more difference. It's chalk and cheese, but what you do have is you have 2 or 3 players in that team that had come from the academy, had been promoted that summer, and they played in the team at different times. So they were the 3 players that straight away took my eye, because obviously that's what I'd been working with. I think you can still do it, but my thought process as a coach has always been the same. Well, you're trying to improve every single player, which then becomes into a collective of a team. So the team is the main thing. I always think in good teams, individuals shine anyway, depending on level. So it was very interesting going in at that level. I observed for a couple of days. I certainly, even me, was scratching my head thinking, I don't know how I imprint and help this group of players. I only thought I was going in for a short period of time, but as you move through the levels, and we had success, you're working with then a higher level of player, some familiarity, bringing in some players that I'd worked with before at Chelsea or other clubs that I'd coached against, elite talents from the cities or Arsenal, etc., that came and helped us at different stages. I think you then, because you've worked at that elite level, you can drive it. You can start to see when it shifts, and certainly there was a momentum shift. But I still, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, I could still see after match days some room for development that we could take forward with us. Because you can play exceptional in first team and get beat. You can play exceptional in development and get beat 9 times out of 10, unless it's tournaments that you've gone in to win. you win tomorrow in development. You don't win tomorrow in first team. You have to win in the present. So that was quite interesting debates and conversations with staff that you work with in senior, because I certainly, I like the fact that I can still draw on my development background and that see the development in players, because it's a journey, a season, a 46 game season is a journey. It's relentless. League One or the Championship, especially the Championship. So the success stories of players who played for Coventry, certainly in those 4 years in the Championship that I was there, from what they were at the start, even if they came on loan from another club, to what we sent them back, you know, what they were 9 months later, is fantastic. And everyone who worked with them should be extremely proud, as mainly the players, because they've listened, they've shaped, and that's the big thing. There's the ultimate development, is the player doesn't have to tell you that you're this or that. It's not about that. It's if the player goes away and, don't know, a couple of years later you see them do an article and they're now main Premier League player, and they've talked about, yeah, I enjoyed my time at Coventry because I really learned a lot. Well, that's why you're a coach. That's why you do it. It's why you get on the grass, and to improve people and players is something that is still the driving force behind me as after all these years.
Yeah, you can still tell that the development piece is like that you're very, very passionate about it. Did you find yourself in the Coventry role? Wenger's got that great quote about you pay for development 3 points. Did you find yourself trying to promote the young players as much as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think I tried to. I still talk to people who were in the academy at the time. You know, the Coventry, the academy, and the first team on different sites. Now, when I first came, the 21s used to train on the pitch next to us. Certainly for the first couple of years. Start pre-season, the players would come. So I would try and push. I wanted to know a lot about the young players. I was always confident, as long as they were good enough, because again, I've been for an environment where you're not going to put somebody in, they're not going to take somebody with the first team at Chelsea if they're not good enough, or they don't feel they can help them. And I liked the fact that, you know, at times, obviously, at any Premier League club, you have to supplement the first team training. Now, at clubs where development is a massive part of the background, that would be Arsene Wenger, Arsenal, say, etc. They'd be there and they'd probably play at 17 like Fabregas. I know elite talent, but he did. Jack Wilshere and other people would play. Chelsea, they played at 17. Chiloba, Ake, McEachran, these types of players, Christensen, Loftus-Cheek, they played, but then to sustain that, it didn't quite happen, whereas at other clubs where the development is right on the forefront. So with Coventry, I wanted to know, and I wanted to help that as best I could. I wanted to help that environment, and it's not just about players, I helped promote the coaches from the development phase there to become first team coaches, to become 21s from 15s, because I could see the role they would have with the young players. And also, we then wanted this constant theme. So, you know, the way I work is quite specific. The way I coach is quite specific to me, the way I work. You know, I like to think that makes it very individual experience you get working with me. There's a lot of top coaches out there, and I've observed quite a lot, but everybody works in a slightly different way. So I think trying to help the coaches understand how I worked and how certain drills worked in certain ways, or theme games that got out what I wanted, how I helped, guided it. I think that was important. I like to think that I played a big part in that. If I wouldn't have had the background or been in the youth development I'd had, I would have been like I was, obviously, as a player, playing to win. Every game you have to win. But there was a few times where I certainly felt the difference when we lost a game to, and I didn't want it to be so up and down. I think in development, like I say, unless you're playing in a youth cup, you're in the tournament, you've got your best team, under 18s, you're going to win. There's no doubt about it, you're going to win. And at Chelsea at that time, before 2011 when, God rest him, great Dermot Drummy, who obviously I worked with him as an assistant. We won our first Youth Cup for so many years. To win the Youth Cup was deemed success then because the players weren't going through into the first team because the level of the first team. So the Youth Cup was almost like there was a lot more pressure on that than at the time. And we obviously went on to win 6 out of 7 and, you know, create that bit of history. But it was important to do it at that stage. I think with Coventry in League Two, Jordan Shipley and Tom Bayliss were 2 academy players that both played in the playoff final against Exeter. Shipley scored, Bayliss played exceptionally well. You know, that was a great story for an esteemed academy that had produced Madison, Callum Wilson. You know, these players, it was a renowned academy, Coventry. So to help give that little bit back, I think was quite important at the time and gave them a little bit more belief. So I thought that was vitally important. I enjoyed that part of my role, yes, and certainly then when we got the first promotion and went into League One, and as I said, we're able to attract higher quality of player, no disrespect to the League Two promotion winning team. There was different requirements. We were going to change more so the way I'd worked. So it was an interesting time. And again, it's only when you come out that you look back at it in that way.
You mentioned there about the coaches, and you've talked quite a bit about the coaching, the group of coaches, and how important it is that those are developers. There's again, how many coaches aspire to work at that level? What advice do you have for them?
What advice? Don't be in too much of a rush. Learn your trade properly. Be very open. Don't come with the idea that you know everything because within 5 minutes you'll be shown something different and it works. Be yourself. Don't change because there's a lot of coaches that feel they have to work in a certain way. I need to be like X or Y. I think be confident in your own ability. Especially if you're a developer and you want to get to elite end development. Don't be afraid if your niche is with a under 14 group rather than you want to get to the top end of the academy. When you go up the pyramid, you come down very quickly. When you reach the top, there's only one place. You go first team or you leave. That's the harsh reality. If you want to be a top end coach developer working 14s, 15s, 16s, 13s, you could be in a real top job being at the niche, top of your field for 20 years and be deemed as, in my opinion, world class at that age group. So you'll know where you fit. I think that's important. Don't worry if you fit at that age group. That would be a big point from me, but be open. Take everything in, be a sponge. If you're a sponge, ask good questions, but don't come with any expectations because it's very, very difficult. It's extremely hard work and there's a lot of pressure every single day. To work at that level every day takes an enormous amount and you only realise when you leave. How much 10 years to go me, I realised when I left. Yeah.
And then the last one, the money ball. We've got in America a lot of people that want a little bit more from the amount of investment and the amount of structures and frameworks that are in place now with youth development, and people are saying, listen, we've got to get more from that. When we go back and look at you mentioned the reference that kind of 10 years, coming off the back of that 10 years, EPPP brought a lot of processes to the building. Is there anything that you would say, listen, you got to get this piece right if you're going to look at developing top end players?
Well, behind the scenes, I would say the systems and processes, how you work in as an organisation. You don't realise how much impact that will have on the pitch. But, you know, Neil Bath, obviously, at Chelsea for 30 years, without a question, world class at systems and processes. So everything, building your own development model. So built his own development model for the academy, not for the Premier League, for Chelsea Academy. So the EPPP, yes, all the components followed, but he built his own model which was right for Chelsea Academy for that 10-year period, which, you know, takes incredible talent and know-how and also bravery, I think. So that bit, I would say your structure, and I think, you know, in American organisations are generally deemed from the outside world as being very strong in those areas. So if you can get that right, then employing the right staff structure, employing the people that you feel in every role can link together to get what your ultimate outcome is. So if you want more outcome of, you know, I read quite a bit at the minute about the MLS and, you know, certainly projects going on in Chicago and some of these other clubs about wanting to bring more players through from their organisation, obviously massively funded organisation anyway. Well, there is going to be accountability somewhere along the line. If you can get everything right, I would say that if that's not working at the moment, something's not right in the chain. What is it? Question mark. So some thought-provoking team bonding, meetings, getting the heads together in all different areas of the club organisation is vital because somebody who sits in a back office, who is brilliant at their job at, I don't know, maybe managing ticket sales, could have a really good idea around organisation that could help find that missing 1% that the player needs, rather than sitting on a train for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or he could get there inside half an hour, but they'd think about it in that way because they're thinking about ticketing organisation. You can find things out from people because there's good people everywhere. If you close off from them and you want to run an organisation in a way where it's just you, not listening to any, you'll break down. And where will you break down? In the key area you don't want to break down, which is getting the players from the youth development pitch onto the first team pitch on an MLS match day.
Brilliant. What a way to finish it. Edy, thank you so much. Fantastic. Really appreciate it. That was outstanding.